Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Culture Binge, the Wisecrack podcast, where we get all types of involved at what's going on in the current cultural zeitgeist. I'm Michael, here as always with Wisecrack researcher Serby. Serby, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good. And Wisecrack Vanguard Alec. Alec, how are things with you today?
I'm great. Thank you for calling me that awful name.
Yeah, you know, the leader of a philosophical movement. You're the leader of Wisecrack. I think we all think of Wisecrack as a large philosophical movement. We have a lot to talk about today. There's lots of things happening, lots of topics to break down. We are going to talk about entitled influencers. We'll talk a little bit about puff pieces and documentary. And we will talk about, I'll put this kindly, work Zoom etiquette in relation to personal sexuality. But before we go any further, we're going to do slaps. And once again, not chaps. And that's because enough things chap right now in the world that we don't need to add any more negative energy to anyone's life.
Negative vibes.
No negative vibes. So if everyone's cool to play by those rules, let's just talk about what slaps with no chaps. Serby, what's something that's just slapping in your life?
I've been watching a lot of Netflix, like really good Netflix. It all started with Emily in Paris, so that's been great. And it's just continued. I've been watching a telenovela and I love it. It's a really great time on Netflix.
Yeah. Well, so what did you think about for Emily in Paris with you? What was that journey like of watching that show? I'm just curious.
So I don't like the character Emily, but I like the other people.
Terrible.
She's just there's no character development or growth, and she's kind of oblivious, and I don't know. I didn't like her, but I liked this story of an idea of American girl going to Paris and then just playing into every single stereotype. And I just loved the images of Paris. It felt like I was traveling, and I think I wanted an escape and to feel like I was sitting there with my baguette and my cheese. So it was nice. It was really what I needed in the last couple of weeks to make me feel like I wasn't here in lockdown.
That's good. Once I also binged that show and started being like, how do people like this? And ended thinking, I need more of this directed and, injected directly into me. So that was a good one. Alec, how about yourself? What are some slaps?
This is probably late to the game. This is a very trendy thing to read early in the pandemic, but The Great Influenza by, I think, John Barry. I'm a quarter way through. It's a really good book. Check it out if you haven't already. It explains how America was a horrible backwater of medicine for a very long time, which I find very amusing.
Wow. Well, that sounds good, if not a little serious. I will say something that I think slaps, and I haven't finished it yet. I started reading a new book that came out by one of my favorite American singer-songwriters, Jeff Tweedy, who is the frontman of the band Wilco. The book is called How to Write One Song. And it's not really just about how to write a song. It's sort of about the creative process in general, how someone who's been pretty creatively profound and productive like him approaches being creative and sort of not judging himself and making stuff. And I found it really cool. And I know a lot of people, because they spent more time at home, might have been taking on creative projects recently. So worth checking out. How to Write One Song. Don't read that book if you expect anything more than that. So good. There's some positive stuff. Look into those things. Let's not be negative. But speaking of people who sometimes maybe get a little bit negative and chap a lot of people's asses, Serby, you're gonna teach us something about contemporary influencer culture, and I'm kind of excited to hear about this. So what do you got for us?
So most of us are familiar with influencers. For those of you who aren't, influencers are individuals who use social media to promote their personal brand, but they also get paid for sponsored posts. And for years, influencers have popped up in every hobby or interest: gaming, beauty, makeup, whatever it is, there's an influencer for it. And while many organizations use influencer marketing as a tactic to increase brand awareness and audience engagement, there are businesses that are absolutely done with the age of the influencer. So here's how influencer marketing works. There are two main ways. So one way is that an influencer has enough followers to get signed with an agency, and brands will come to the influencer. They'll say, we want you to post about this product. We'll pay you, say, $1,000. You'll post it at this time. It'll include this many pictures. And it's transactional. It's like a business relationship. The other way influencers get involved with brands is that they approach businesses and they'll say, I have 500,000 followers. Let me know if you want to collaborate. Or if you send me free products, I'll give you a post for brand exposure. And the worst thing that the second way is that they'll approach businesses in real life. So they'll go to like a bakery and be like, oh, I'll give you like free exposure if you give me this cake for free. So they'll just do it right on the spot. And in the past year, I've seen and heard more businesses express dissatisfaction with influencers. They've said that they're greedy and entitled, and specifically small businesses are upset because small businesses have small profit margins. So when influencers ask for free stuff, the impact on a business's bottom line is significant. So this anti-influencer sentiment has been growing in the pandemic, and we're all aware of how difficult the pandemic and the lockdowns have been on both individuals and businesses. And the worst thing is that businesses have started to say that they've seen an uptick in the number of influencers who are asking for free items. So not only are businesses struggling because people aren't coming into the door, but now they have the people who are coming into the door asking for free stuff. So before I hear your thoughts on influencer marketing, I want to share a couple of examples. So I know an influencer who has, I think, 2 or 3 million followers, and her entire life is sponsored. Like, she had a wedding and everything from the flowers, the cake, her clothes, her shoes, everything was given to her. And she's that influencer who both has brands come to her and she also approaches brands. So like for her photographer, she sent links to her social media accounts and said, let me know if you want to collaborate. I'm getting married next month. And even when she bought a new house, she had the entire house sponsored by local businesses.
Do you personally know this person, or this is just somebody on the internet?
I actually went to this wedding.
Wow. Whoa. Was it the coolest wedding ever?
No.
Or the corniest wedding ever?
I mean, it was nice, but it was very much like at the reception, it was like, and I'd like to thank this brand for giving me this. And I'd like to thank that person for this. And it felt like I was at a sponsored event. Like, I felt like I was at like it's some sort of industry party. And like at the reception, there was like I think there was like a sign that said something like candles and decor provided by brand. So it felt very, very gross. Anyway, so like her house, like she's had painters and whoever come and like paint the house in exchange for exposure. And my hairstylist told me that she had an influencer approach her saying that if she gave her a free haircut and color, which I think was like a total of like $250, that she would post this on her social channels. And my hairstylist is just like, she's like a single mom, I think, and she just doesn't have a ton of money to put into marketing. So she was interested in how this worked, but she said a few people called, nobody came in, and she wished that she had done something different to market herself. And while I think that influencer marketing it can be done well when done strategically, it can be impactful and beneficial for businesses. But I do think the people of asking for free things, especially people who can afford to pay full price, is repugnant. And I prefer a more professional and structured approach to influencer marketing with both parties understanding what they'll receive. So it's not just give me a free lip gloss and I'll post it on Insta. It's let's talk about what the messaging is. Who are you trying to reach? What is your audience like? What are the ingredients of this? And does your business and do your ethical standards align with my personal goals? Anyway, I was really grossed out to hear that it's gotten worse during the pandemic. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a business I like a lot in Los Angeles that's called CVT Soft Serve. This is not sponsored content. And just for example, I hate dessert, but I love soft serve ice cream. I think it's the only good way to eat ice cream. And I think scooped ice cream is hard, cementy trash. And I don't understand why people like it.
I agree with
and also vegan soft serve is so much better than vegan scooped ice cream. But that said, there's this business and it runs out of LA. It's a dude that owns a couple trucks and they do soft serve at events or on street corners. And a dude that just like owns a business himself. He runs it with his wife. They have a few kids and he will get these emails that say things like, "Hi, I work for this celebrity or this influencer. We're doing a big event. We can't pay you, but wondering if you could come out and do ice cream for great exposure." And he gets these all the time and he'll post them on his Instagram. And then his responses, which are like, "Fuck you. I run a small business. I don't know you shit." And then he's had people come up to the truck before and literally just be like, "Hi, can I have this ice cream? But I'm an influencer, so I'll take pictures. Do I not have to pay?" And it's worth looking at his Instagram because his responses are great. And there's another business in Los Angeles I like called Burgers Never Say Die. Not sponsored content. It's just the best goddamn hamburger in Los Angeles. And they have a huge sign up at their business that says like, "Influencers fuck off." And they've especially said during the pandemic, it's like they're barely able to keep their business going. And yet people are still asking them for free shit. I really hate it. I think it's such a bad look. And I think, like you said, Serby, I guess it's one thing to have a partnership with a brand or a corporation. I still think that's like corny and I don't like it. But like sometimes we got to do what we got to do in this world. But to just roll up to a business, especially a small business, and demand free shit because you have a lot of online followers is just the dumbest thing ever. It's such a bad look. And I think it's kind of a toxic approach to what it means to have like notoriety or fame or whatever it might be. Like, I don't know, Matthew McConaughey is famous and he would never do that. So it's just like, be like him. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like there's an intoxicating effect to getting free shit. Like the few times I've been at events where I'm like pampered with free shit and have, been like, "Oh, I work for a YouTube channel with, give me this $200 gift card." But that was like at a place where I'm not going to excuse the behavior, but it was at least at a thing where people were there to pander to YouTube influencers, even though I'm not.
Well, yeah,
one.
You didn't demand it. You didn't run up to the table and say, "Please give me free money."
Yeah.
They asked you.
I played it. Yeah. They're like, "How many subscribers do you have?" And I was like, I maybe have like 2 million.
See, Vanguard of the channel.
Are you ever on camera? One time I was. So it's intoxicating. Like I think for anyone, I don't think anyone's above like that, but I wonder what percentage of this is just like that intoxication fueled by like a narcissism that's like, give me free shit all the time. Because I mean, Jacob, who I love dearly, was so amazing. Like he'd just message everyone being like, "Hey, do you want to like donate this equipment to us?" And then like, we'll like post about you on social media. And these were larger companies. And as someone like not looking at the budget or anything, I was like, this is sweet. Like, we've got like cool new headphones and stuff and we'll plug them and whatever. At the same time, I understand that that's very bad. The other end of it is that I think a lot of people are trying to be influencers now because they probably are working from home or have maybe lost their jobs and are trying to reinvent their life. Didn't we talk about someone who was trying to reinvent their life as a travel influencer in this like, or someone said, or somebody sent us an email about this horribly harebrained scheme.
Their brother and sister-in-law or something.
Yeah.
Or cousin.
And so I think there's probably a lot more of that where it's like, "Hey, I have like 500 followers. You want to give me free ice cream?" And I think that's pretty terrible. But also it's not new. I read like even 3, 4, maybe even 5 years ago, there's articles about hotels getting sick of influencers asking for free rooms and everyone shutting down. So I think we're kind of perpetually at war with influencers.
So the example with Jacob asking for free things, when it's like a large company, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Like, but if it's something that's like a small business, I don't like that at all because it's actually like a human who's trying to make money.
Yeah, if there's like some gamer and Best Buy gives them some hardware, headphones, like whatever. Best Buy is a multi-billion-dollar company. They can afford some shit. Who cares? But yeah, when it's, like I said before, a dude with 2 ice cream trucks or a tiny burger shop in a strip mall owned by an individual, like fuck off. Like they should not be giving you stuff.
I just looked around the Skype box and we're all using the same Rode microphone that was given to us. But thank you.
Shouts to Rode.
Shouts to, I legitimately like this microphone, so thank you, Rode.
But this is a functional relationship because they create audio products. We use them to create quality content. It's not like we're just like, hey, can I have a sandwich? Like there's so, you know, Serby used this terminology before of, do you want to collab? And I think that's an interesting frame for this, right? Because there's certain partnerships where collaboration makes sense. So let's say it's like a famous chef does a collaboration with a hot sauce company, and it looks good for the hot sauce company because the famous chef uses it. The famous chef is like, oh, here's how I use this in some of my food. And it might be a little corny, but there's a genuine relationship between the brand and the influencer. Getting paid. Yeah, of course they're getting paid. But, you know, at least I'm like, okay, this makes sense. But if it's like just a person who wants to collab with like, I don't know, a sushi restaurant, it's like, what does this have to do with anything? You're just a person. This is just sushi. I don't need you two to have a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like if it benefits both of us, and if I'm going to get paid for something, and it's not about money, but it's just the fact that it feels more like a business relationship rather than me getting free stuff and feeling like a moocher.
I think that's what it is, like this is a business relationship and also get free things versus like I just walk around asking everyone for free shit. I think maybe that's what it is, because you know, I follow various like Instagram sort of like vegan like restaurants, and I'm sure like, you know, they're going to different vegan restaurants across New York City and getting free food and taking pictures and posting it. And to be honest, like I will probably go more likely to go to those restaurants as a result. But I think, you know, if they're emailing these people and possibly even, you know, getting paid or doing this in the business context versus showing up randomly and being like, hey, give me a free sandwich.
Yeah. And I think there's a thing too where like I don't want to be too cynical in that. I don't know, for example, if there was like a great restaurant in my city that was like, oh, we love Wisecrack. We know that you like eating here. Yeah, but if they were like, hey, will you do a thing where on a Wisecrack video, Burns is going to take a bite of our burrito every 10 minutes and just like shout us out. If it was my favorite place, I'd be like, this works for both of us because this is a establishment which is genuinely good that I really like, and they really like our channel. That'd be really weird if a cool burrito place liked Wisecrack. If that's you, reach out. But you know, I think there are things like that, or like when a great musician does a sponsored content thing with like Fender guitars. It's like, well, yes, this musician was probably playing that guitar anyways. Now they just get to like work with the brand. So I think stuff like that makes sense, just to make sure I'm not being too cynical, right? But I think most of what happens on Instagram, I do find to not be that, and to be like hanger-on, lecherous bullshit.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that it just depends on how the approach works. Like if it's the business approaching you, that seems cool. But if it's definitely like you just going out and saying, hey, KLM Airlines, want to fly me for free? Which I know I've said multiple times and have not heard back.
It's getting uncomfortable.
We will all sink this low if offered the opportunity. I just want everyone listening to know that.
But I think it depends like on the approach. If it's a business is like, I want to give Wisecrack free stuff, I'd be like, cool. Like if we like it and if you're ethical and cool, like why not use it?
Yeah. But I guess, do you think, Serby, that one of the problems is that like a younger culture of influencers didn't come up in that era of more kind of like collaborative brand deals? So in their mind, it's just like, I'm popular, me get free thing.
I think, you know what I mean? I think for at least some proportion of people, it's that.
I think there is like a growing like sense of entitlement where people think like, well, if this is my job, like you should be grateful to work with me and have exposure.
Yeah. I think the thing too that bums people out is like, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know if Bill Murray goes to, he did this actually. Bill Murray went to the ice cream truck I'm thinking of. But like if Bill Murray goes to an ice cream truck and they might be like, oh, fuck yeah, Bill Murray, we'll give you free ice cream because you are literally a legend in your field and someone people love. But then some influencer, even if they have 10 million followers show up, I do think a lot of businesses are like, I don't know who the fuck you are. You're not entitled to what Bill Murray or Sophia Loren or the Barefoot Contessa or I don't know, another random celebrity. You can also just
purchase follow. Like you can get sort of like click farms to follow you and be like, oh, I have 100. I see this on Twitter all the time. People with 50,000 followers and every tweet gets like 3 likes.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, right? I think for a lot of businesses, at least smaller ones, it's like, what do you even do? Like, why am I giving you things? What's your talent?
Yeah.
And I know that's a little reductive, and I know marketing is a talent and branding is a skill, I guess. But I think that's the hard thing. If it's, once again, if the guitar company is like, hey, we're going to give John Mayer guitar stuff, it's like, that makes sense. He's very talented at this thing. But if you're just someone who has followers, like, I don't know, what's your skill? What are you doing at the talent show? What makes you special? Why should God love you?
I don't want to hate completely on influencers because there has been a movement. I think it was called like Pay Our Way, where travel influencers were encouraged to just pay for their own travel and just talk about the brands and the hotels and the airlines that they love because they can afford to pay for it. And there was another one that was like eat out to help out or something. And that was go eat at small businesses or go eat at restaurants that you love and post about it for free.
I mean,
so
not that influencers are journalists, but I mean, I think there's also the sort of conflict of interest in that, like, if you're being given this for free or getting the hotel paid for, are you going to give it an actually objective review? Whereas like, yeah, the best travel influencers telling you about the good hotels and best airlines are probably the ones who don't have that conflict of interest. And I think they're like, everyone is kind of an influencer. So I'm sure there's lots of like, beauty YouTubers who are like really good at doing makeup are like very interesting, talented people. And if they're giving recommendations and you're looking for makeup to purchase, you might hope that they're not, they are at least separating what is a paid advertisement from what they're doing.
Yeah. And then it's that question of like, were you in the game before this? So if you're someone who's already an expert at makeup stuff and like the art of that, then you start making content, then you get partnerships. Well, that's great. You were already doing that. If you're someone that already had a passion for travel or culture or food, and then you translate it into partnerships, to me, that makes more sense than just like, I started getting partnerships because I post pictures where I look dank or something. Yeah. Then it's like, why do I care about your stuff? That's also a skill once again. But I just think maybe if like your whole talent is looking dank, then I don't know what product I associate with that.
You're just jealous that none of us know how to look dank.
I think we all look dank.
What does dank mean?
God, sir, but you never did drugs in the 2000s.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before we move on, any final thoughts on this and any pleas that we want to make to potential sponsors to sell our souls for free use? Besides Serby, who will do anything for KLM?
Yeah, I would. If you're an influencer, write in. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Am I wrong?
Yeah, we'll be empathetic. Like we don't hate. There's like the straw man influencer that's easy to hate, and then all the sort of people in between who actually are doing cool. There's a fucking guy who makes like pottery on TikTok who's an influencer. He's really good at pottery, and he's probably super cool. Happy for that guy to get all the free clay.
Yeah. Pottery guy, hit us up. Skateboarding cranberry juice Fleetwood Mac guy, hit us up.
He's my favorite.
Anyone, that guy rules. Yeah, so that's great. And truly, if you are an influencer, we'd love to talk to you about that, as long as you don't suck. But if you've ever rolled up at my favorite ice cream or burger place, you do not get to speak on us ever, or speak to us ever. So speaking of influential activity online, I wanted to quickly talk about a current event topic. And this is something that happened this week. And it's a little mishap that happened at a Zoom meeting of the staff of the New Yorker magazine. They were doing a mock, I think it was a mock election debate, or a mock debate of some sort.
I think they were trying to figure out like what all the different angles, like you had to role play as like a conservative journalist or something like that. I don't fully understand it, so don't. But something, and it's
like fine. That. And we do this at Wisecrack. We're role playing most days. Yeah. But a legal analyst and journalist by the name of Jeffrey Toobin. You might know him. He goes on CNN a lot. He writes for the New Yorker, amongst other places. He published a lot of books. During this meeting, they went on a break. He thought that he was like muted from Zoom, like as if like the call was done so no one could see or hear him. During this time, he then jumped on another call that was either with a adult
breakout room. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I don't mean to fuck up your story.
Oh yeah. So there was breakout rooms happening on the Zoom meeting. He thought he was not still live. He thought because there was breakout sessions, his camera and audio were not currently engaged. He moved his screen down a little bit. He then on another device got on a call of sorts. I think there's some thought that it might have been like a cam situation. I don't think anyone knows for sure. And then he proceeded to, one could say, go Toobin by himself. Let's be okay. But we'll say he masturbated. And while he thought he was on not actively working, he was on Zoom the whole time. So his colleagues at the New Yorker were able to see him masturbating on screen. So, and then I'll just finish by saying this. Yeah. And then he popped back on. Unaware. So he just opened his computer back up and was like, yeah, so the thing about the Supreme Court is, and his colleagues had just seen him go to town on himself.
Here's my question. Well, first of all, let's just get out of the way. Don't crank it during Zoom meetings. Anyone, men, women, it's just don't do it. But was he
sex negative? Don't enjoy anything.
Like, I think the timeline matters a lot. Like, was he jerking it to his colleagues? Because I don't know that we know that he was not. I think we know that he was not jerking it to his colleagues. I think he was jerking it to a third party entity. And I think it was either he was having phone sex or he was on like a cam website where he was paying a sex worker to, as the kids say, talk him off. But was this like, let's say you got your video off, you're on a call, you're making lunch. Not everyone needs to know that you're making lunch, whatever. Yeah. Or was this... What was it, that kind of situation where he's like, I don't need to be super engaged in this call, so I'm going to like play Xbox, which again, I know it's not comparable. Or was this truly like, this is my lunch break? Because, sorry.
So there's varying accounts of this. So the story broke via Vice. Also, I'll just say this too. Who snitched at the New Yorker staff? Keep the drama inside the house.
Okay.
I know. I'm of mixed thoughts about it. But details have sort of like trickled out or shot out. And what we know is that, so it sounds like what was happening is there was a general Zoom meeting, then there was breakouts, and that he was not a part of the breakout. So that in his mind, okay, I'm going to kind of put my computer to the side before the meeting comes back. And during that time, one could make a sandwich, one could take a power nap, or one could furiously masturbate without knowing they're on screen. But it sounds like, and I guess I'm giving him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here, that he seems to have thought that he was on a break of sorts from work and that no one could see him. So I guess here's my question for all of you, right? Would this be different if it was like a delivery person who, in between deliveries, went home, masturbated, washed up, and then got back after it? I guess delivery person is a weird choice for me to have made because now you're thinking of that person touching your food. But you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think the better one is one of my friends used to work in Midtown, and like he would smoke around the corner from basically like an adult video shop where they have little booths, and he'd just see like tech bros going in like, during their lunch breaks to go to this adult video shop to crank one out and go back to work. I think it's important to frame like a lot of the reactions, which I think are totally justified, is like, this is the behavior of like predators. And I think if stuff were to come out like Jeffrey Toobin's always cranking it at work and always trying to accidentally expose himself to, then like, not cool. Like there's that level of it. But also like without a pattern of behavior, it's maybe, I think it's easy to give him that narrative of that, like, he's cranking it and getting off on the fact that his coworkers are on the call, and there's like a sexual predator element to that. And I don't want to discount that theory, but the other one is like, if you're a tech bro who likes to whack it on his lunch break, or like, to be honest, like during college, like I knew women who would like have bad cramps and crank it in the women's bathroom. And so I'm not going to excuse all these things.
Let me offer, I want to hear what Serby thinks about this. I just want to give a little, just more of the broader context as well for this, is that the past 48 hours of the discourse online about this has been very interesting, because the first wave was, oh my God, this happened. Haha, that's so funny. Second wave, this is really gross. What a piece of shit. Third wave was, actually, this is just indicative of how work from home creates these really weird boundaries, and we shouldn't shame someone for cranking it on their work break because we should be sex posy. And then now I think like this morning, it's shifted back to, oh, cool. So now we're defending 60-year-old men who pull their dicks out on Zoom calls.
Yeah.
So that's been like the cycle of the discourse.
On Zoom calls is...
Unless that's your job. If you're a sex worker and that's your job, you can do that.
Sorry,
but if it's not your job, don't do it. Okay. So Serby, what do you think?
So I've worked remotely for years and I've used Zoom for a really long time. And I think that working from home, you should still treat it like it's a professional environment. So I understand that you're at home, your kids are going to run around, you're going to need to like move your laundry around or whatever, and that's fine. But when you're in a call, you should try to be as present as possible and not like touch yourself in a call.
Yeah,
so
no, I agree.
I don't think that like that's an okay excuse to be like, oh, we should be sex positive. Like I'm totally sex positive, but I
think the chronology question is like, yeah, was he doing it during the call or was he doing this like basically not his lunch break exactly, but like on his own time?
I don't want to pull like a Ross and Rachel, but if they were on a break, then I feel like.
But were they on a break or were they in breakout rooms on
we
Zoom?
don't. I think
the breakout rooms existed, but
we don't know if he was a part of one.
Yeah.
Right.
But he should have been though, right? Like if it was.
Why are you such a boss who's like, he should be working? Maybe he wasn't a part of it. Maybe there was a breakout. To be clear, I'm not standing up for this guy. I'm simply saying there is a possible, we don't know all the details. There's a possible series of events where there was a main event, there was breakouts, and he wasn't a part of that. So he was legit on a break for a bit, but just left Zoom on until it came back.
Well, it doesn't matter though. Like if you're in that call, it doesn't matter if he wasn't a part of a breakout room or not. He was still in a call. That time was still blocked off for work. So to me, I think I don't care that he was working at home. I don't care about anything. Like I feel like if you're supposed to be working during that time, I expect you to not touch yourself.
Yeah. So I agree with Serby, but the reason I actually find this not even to like litigate, I feel like litigating what Jeffrey Toobin's like non-innocence is maybe a little less interesting.
Yeah.
But I think what is more interesting is the lack of boundaries. Cause I think, this is a clear case of like, don't whack it during work calls, et cetera, et cetera. But consider there's like lots of other examples. Like everyone's been on a conference call with like 20 people and are doing something else. It could be playing Xbox. It could be cooking food. They could be taking a shit. Right. And then it's like, what happens when that comes on? People take lunch breaks. People have their own time. What if, you work in your bedroom and decide to like have a lunch break with your partner and like get freaky? Like, the problem,
and just for the kids out there, get freaky. What Alec meant by there is a euphemism for sex. So if you were born in like the mid 90s to early 2000s, that's what he meant by that. Just so you know.
I think like it's easy to say that like, I mean, like, I think kind of what Serby's saying is like, listen, from 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or however long you work, like that's work time and like, don't do any of that stuff. But I think, as during the pandemic and just working from home, those things become collapsed because, even if you're saying from 9 to 5, you're not going to have sex, you're not going to whack it, you're still allowed to poop. That's fine. What if you have a call at like 7 p.m.? Like those boundaries are constantly shifting. And so like, even if the Jeffrey Toobin case is super cut and dry, like fuck that dude, he's cranking it during a work call, that is not cool. And I think that it might be what's happening. I think it still raises this like complete lack of distinction. I don't know, Serby, if you wanted to respond to that.
Yeah. No, but I think there's something to that.
Serby?
I muted myself. Is my volume back?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. So I think that the distinction is that if it's fine if you want to do that during work hours. The problem is that he decided to do it when he was in a work call.
Yeah.
So like, I think you should treat being in a Zoom room as if you're in an actual physical room. So until you click that leave button, you should be as professional as possible.
Agree.
And like, I don't care if your kid's running around, like that's fine. But it's this other thing is the problem. So if somebody like gets off the call and starts like touching themselves, whatever, like I take naps for 3 hours during the day.
Whoa, cut that. If Serby's boss hear this is,
she knows.
Wow. Nice.
She's like, did you wake up? And I'm like, are you awake yet? I'm like, yeah, I just woke up. So I think you're when you work at home, your personal life and your professional life do blend, but you should still have some decency to not do that when you're in a work call.
I don't mean to construe it that. Yeah, sorry.
I think that it's incredibly disrespectful. And this whole, like, he didn't know he was on camera. Well, like, you were like, there's no excuse for that.
Yeah,
like
for sure. And I think just to maybe I'm like agreeing or sort of like rephrasing some of what Alec was saying here. Totally. I don't think, just to be clear, if you're listening to this, I don't think any of us are saying like, no, it's cool that he like JO'd when he was on a work call. No one thinks that. Well, I mean, some people think that, but we don't. But yeah, I just think it gets at maybe that idea of the blurred lines these days with work from home stuff. And like, I think, Serby, you're someone who, correct me if I'm wrong, has just worked from home in normal world, and Alec as well. And I think for a lot of us, working from home has been a pandemic specific thing. So it does create different vibes where, like, I don't know, when Wisecrack had an office, right? I would sometimes be like, oh, I'm going to go get lunch and a coffee, and I would leave for 30 minutes. And like, yeah, maybe if the grocery store bathroom was open and there wasn't a line, and I'm kidding, I never jerked off in a grocery store bathroom, but I think there used to be this sense at which there was time. And the other thing I will say, I don't think this was the case, but there are companies out there that are requiring their employees to like stay logged in all day now. And to me, like, that brings up like weird stuff. Like, if my company says I have to be logged in on Zoom all day to like prove that I'm working, like, what if I feel stressed? And what if a stress release for me is going in the other room and just like doing self-care on my penis? And I don't know. So I just think like the Toobin thing for sure. I just think this does bring up some questions about the blurred lines of work-life balance in our contemporary moment.
Yeah. And I think the only confusion for me, like, I'm on board with Serby. If you're on a call, if you think your camera's off, don't whack it. Maybe cook a meal. Even if you're playing Xbox, maybe not the most professional thing, don't whack it. But the distinction is like, did he think he logged off from that? And he did not. Anyway.
I'm obsessive about checking to make sure my camera is off and my sound is off. Because one time, a couple of years ago, I joined this call, and like, you know how you have tabs open that like will randomly just start up again and like start like shouting at you. So this was a call. It was like super important, like all hands call. There were executives on the team, and I was reviewing a Thug Notes video. And it was like, what it do, y'all? And the whole meeting stopped, and it was like, Serby, would you
mute your microphone?
Please mute yourself?
Yeah. Well, I hate to do this, y'all. I didn't realize how deeply we'd go into Toobin's too, but I think we in general agree on this. Would obviously love to hear what people think about this as well, but I think we do need to move on. So sorry for that. We will do a dedicated episode to digital workplace masturbation soon. But for now, another type of masturbatory thing you could do is produce a documentary about you that makes yourself look good or that you have some say in. And Alec, I think this is a thing that's been happening more recently that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. And so I'm sure maybe some of you know this. A lot of us have been watching The Vow. Obviously, months ago, we were obsessed with Tiger King. I, even as a non-sports person, enjoyed The Last Dance. There's a new Stars documentary also on Nexium called, I forget what it's called, but it seems better.
Seduced.
Yeah, there's a lot of documentaries, especially on Netflix, especially on Hulu. And there's actually this really interesting article that I would encourage everyone to read. It's pretty long, from the Columbia Journalism Review by Danny Funt, about kind of like access-only documentaries. Like, I think a thing that we don't think about when we watch these things is like, how did the filmmakers get access to these people? And a lot of times it's basically quid pro quo. So this is a quote from the article. This golden age of documentaries is defined in part by the blurring of what it even means to be a documentary. Earlier, he establishes that 147 million people have watched at least one Netflix documentary. They're very, very big right now. But what's happening is, filmmakers are making deals to get access to the people that they are documenting. This isn't always the case, but examples that come up is there was a Hillary Clinton documentary. They mentioned Firefest, and Firefest, there was a controversy because Fuck Jerry, the marketing company, and whatever Jerry's last name is, was like an executive producer on the Firefest documentary about the fraud that he did. And if you notice, that one very much like excused him and like him being a bad guy in that scenario. In the other Firefest documentary, Billy McFarland was paid. There's a Bill Gates documentary on Netflix that I watched, which I hated, called like Decoding Inside Bill Gates's Brain, or Decoding Bill Gates. The filmmaker, the director behind that was this guy, Davis Guggenheim, who had made a pro charter school documentary, which is one of Bill Gates's pet causes, and also received funding. That documentary received funding from the Gates campaign. So what's happening is that, you know, in the case of Hillary Clinton, and I'm just using that because it's well documented, is the campaign actually shot a ton of the footage. They met a filmmaker that they felt comfortable with because they had sort of ties to the Democratic Party. And so, you know, I think a lot of these documentary makers will say, oh, like I would never give my editorial independence. But there's this weird relationship between I need access, and the person giving that access will pick the people friendly to them, might have like a financial partnership with them, might make themselves an executive producer. And so it makes me sort of look back and question like a lot of the things I'm watching in The Vow, where it seems like the access, this guy, Mark Vincente, who is basically the good guy, you know, he's in the cult, escapes the cult, takes the cult down. The documentary essentially absolves him of any wrongdoing. And I think it's just a very interesting question of, what do these documentary filmmakers have to do to get access to the people that they're making documentaries about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Vow and secluded thing is especially, apropos or poignant here, because when you watch The Vow, like you said, Mark and Sarah and our guy Nippy and Bonnie, they seem like they're like good. But after finishing The Vow, I learned that like Mark Vicente is technically helped in like legit sex trafficking minors across borders.
Was that Seduced or what?
Well, that's just like in legal documents, and I guess Seduce is going to get into it. But yeah, like these people were, you know, had their hands a lot dirtier. And even with like the case of Mark Vincente, like he was in another cult before he joined NXIVM. So this is someone who like, it's called, I had it up earlier. It's like the something fellowship. It was this woman in Washington state, and a god who was 660,000 years old spoke to her. And they used to like smoke cigs and drink wine to like get in the right vibe or something, and like lay out all night and party. It was super weird. So, but all that to say is with the Vow thing, of course, and the Gates documentary for sure. And this kind of makes me think of Serbi's topic a little bit, like the way in which in like influencer culture, the lines between genuinely endorsing a product or being enthusiastic about an experience, it's hard to know if that's objective now because of how much content is sponsored. And it seems like the same thing has happened in documentary filmmaking. Is there any objectivity left, or is there always something sus going on like this? It makes it really hard to figure out these days.
Serbi?
So I have had a hard time with documentaries because of this. And I think that as soon as I realize like they have like footage of like meetings or like inside information about stuff, I'm always like, well, how'd you get that? Like, are you a member? Like, or did you promise to like let them have like a final review or have some sort of like say? I prefer documentaries that are more of like investigations after the fact, like that Going Clear is really interesting to me. Or some of those are kind of neat. Or like, what's that other one? Oh, The Jinx. Although that's not quite like a documentary, but something that's more of like investigation and like, let's talk to a bunch of people rather than like, let's somehow get our camera and like interview the CEO of whatever.
Definitely. I mean, it makes you think of like the work of Louis Theroux, the British documentary filmmaker whose stuff is on various American streaming platforms. But when he made a movie on Scientology, and he's someone that in the past has like embedded himself in a lot of weird and alternative communities, including like the Westboro Baptist Church and other stuff. But he wanted to make a Scientology movie and no one would talk to him. But he still made a really interesting documentary about Scientology that was sort of antagonistic and ended up luring the Scientologist to him because he's a good documentary filmmaker and didn't have to sort of like have someone buy into it or to sort of like make a deal with someone to pay them to get access. And like, in my mind, that's what it means to be a good documentarian. And I just feel like a lot of people don't have that skill anymore, or that sort of like journalistic aspect to that type of filmmaking.
But I don't even think it's, I mean, obviously it's on the directors. And in this article, there's directors who are like, whatever, like it's one thing if you're making political propaganda, but like, who cares if, Michael Jordan held on to the footage from that Last Dance documentary for 2 decades because he was the one who had to clear the clips of him, playing cards and doing all this shit. But I don't agree with that sentiment that like, whatever, it's not propaganda, like political propaganda, who cares? But I think it's like a studio pressure, right? When you're pitching Netflix, if you're to say, hey, I've got this great investigative documentary about like Hillary Clinton and her campaign, maybe it's positive, maybe it's negative, maybe, it's neutral, but like I did a lot of research, I'm really smart and all that stuff. They're going to be like, great, who's attached to that that's really famous who will get clicks? Like this is a conversation whenever you're trying to sell a show, whether it's a comedy show or whatever, it's like, who's the massive celebrity on it? And for the case of documentaries, it's like, oh, you got Hillary Clinton to talk to you, like fucking awesome. Or you got Bill Gates to talk to you. Whereas if you go in the room, it's like, hey, nobody knows my face. I want to make a documentary about Bill Gates. Give me money. You could succeed, but you can't. And so, I'm not going to call these documentary filmmakers like evil. Like, I think they're just trying to get by in the ecosystem that's been sort of created by like how stuff gets made.
Sure, but I will say, didn't the documentary Mind the Gap win an Oscar? And it's about some teenage skateboarders from Western Illinois.
Maybe, sure.
No, I just want to say, or like the Honeyland, which was an Oscar-nominated documentary last year, is about a Macedonian woman who keeps bees. I don't know. Part of me, I get what you're saying, Alec, but the devil's advocate part of me wants to say, if you find a good enough story, it doesn't matter if there's a celebrity attached, people will care. And maybe sometimes having someone attached is a lazy way to not actually have a good story. And that's why the Bill Gates and Hillary Clinton documentaries both suck. I'll just say it, because they're puff pieces for an influential person who they're just hagiography. They're not really documentaries.
Right.
And I think maybe if they just called themselves like visual hagiographies, fine. But I feel like documentary implies something that we're not getting. Sorry, Serby, go ahead.
Yeah, like a documentary implies like an independent perspective and like a look at what's going on from all sides. And that's not what this is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think maybe people aren't into it. Maybe we're analyzing it too much. Like maybe people are excited to watch a fluff piece about Hillary Clinton or Bill Gates.
I think they are, yeah.
Like good enough for them, because I guess it's the same sort of thing. Like if you read certain publications that have a specific like political lean to them, like I don't watch certain things or read certain publications because they don't align with what I want. So maybe we want a more independent look and other people are happy with like, I'm not expressing myself as it sounded better in my head than it does.
No, I think what you're saying makes really good sense.
Don't make them
yeah.
I think a really good example of this is the recent Paris Hilton documentary that they put out on Netflix and has tons of views. And I think people wanted to watch it because like they find Paris Hilton interesting. And I watched it and thought it was interesting. But then I did feel a little bummed when after the fact I read about all the things that weren't included and aspects of her life that weren't included. And was like, okay, like, both things are true. This is a documentary that she produced about herself. So of course she's going to look really good. But it was vulnerable and got at some real stuff. Also, she's someone who has like brazenly used the N-word over the years and hasn't apologized. And these are both like true things. And recently I actually watched the documentary that Dan Harmon kind of got produced about himself, Harmontown. But that's one where I'm like, okay, he gave the rights to it, but he gave them final cut. So there's times in that documentary where he straight up looks like an alcoholic, abusive asshole. And at least like he kind of made a documentary about himself, which is some narcissistic shit, but he truly kept in the bad. So when you watch this movie, you're like, ugh, this guy's kind of funny and smart, but like kind of a dick who has some problems.
Yeah. I think, there's an interesting dichotomy in the article, which speaks to your point, Serby. But if you're reading a book that's like the autobiography of Hillary Clinton, as told to, like you'll dictate or speak to some sort of ghostwriter, not a ghostwriter, but just a writer. It's like, great, like here's a biography of Hillary Clinton by Hillary Clinton. Like this is what it is. But like the Hillary Clinton documentary, for instance, was marketed as like a raw inside look at Hillary Clinton, like that people don't get to see. When, the article gets into, her team had like edit notes on it. They filmed most of the footage to begin with. The one of the people behind it, their like dad was a Democratic senator, so Hillary Clinton, even in like allowing it to get made, like knew that like he was one of the ones that, you know, she could trust to tell like her kind of message. And so I don't think people going into that are like, oh, or even the Bill Gates one, like I had assumed I was just going to get a documentary about Bill Gates, and I wasn't expecting it to be positive or negative or neutral. But then, you know, as I was watching, I was like, oh, this is like clearly designed to just be like propaganda for Bill Gates, and like washing over like his stuff about like his antitrust and, you know, all these other things. And just like, you know, it's a hagiography, as Burns said. And I don't think that's clear when you click on it. Like if I had bought a Bill Gates biography as written by Bill Gates, I'd be like, okay, like this is what I'm supposed to expect.
So it's like a misrepresentation of what you're actually getting. They marketed it as like a fresh inside look, like see the real Hillary. Yeah. That it's really see the Hillary through her eyes.
Well, and exactly. I think, you know, you think about documentary films. I know, I'm trying to think. I feel like the first documentary filmmaker I was ever really aware of was probably like Michael Moore and then Errol Morris. And I don't know, like we could say a lot of, you know, there's a lot of criticisms being made of, I guess, both of them. But like with Michael Moore, at least, I was like, okay, a documentary is when someone investigates something that might make people look bad and ask difficult questions and maybe makes things uncomfortable, trying to get at a truth of some sort. Or like with an Errol Morris film, like, you know, Thin Blue Line or Thin Red Line. I think confused
it's Thin
now.
Blue Line.
Thin Blue Line, yeah. You know, it gets at this idea of, you know, he's asking really hard questions about a court case, and someone eventually gets freed because of it. There's this sort of like desire for the truth via film. And I think that's the question. And maybe this is me being too idealistic, but I think at its best, documentary filmmaking is trying to uncover a concealed truth or get to the bottom of something. And I think a lot of the documentaries that, you know, come up in that article Alec and things we're talking about aren't doing that. They're trying to use reality for entertainment's sake or to create that like hagiographic cinema.
Yeah.
Well, so if there's nothing left on that one, you know, and also too, like, let us know documentaries you really like, ones you think do this well, or maybe let us know if you think we're just being cranky and all this is fine. And you can do that whenever you want, via phone, via email, and via post if you can find any of our home addresses. So phone number, call us at 213-534-8807. That's 213-534-8807. Just so you know, it's a voicemail. So if you're expecting Alec's voice to be there on the other end, he's not going to be there to live chat with you, but you can leave a voicemail. We will listen. We love it when you call. If you're more of a fingers on the keys type person, culturebinge@wisecrack.co. As always, there is no M. So culturebinge@wisecrack.co. We love to hear from you, whether that's about influencers, about workplace jacking, and about documentary puff pieces. We want to hear about all of that and more, and even stuff you want to hear us talk about. We'd love to do it. So Alec, what do we have this time for people who have hit us up?
We've got a voicemail from Ross about last week. We talked about relationships during COVID and maybe going very bad or very well. Joy, can you play that?
Hey, Culture Bin folks. This is Ross from DC. I just wanted to respond to what you had mentioned about like relationships during the time of COVID. I'm in a somewhat unique position. My wife and I moved back in with her folks just before COVID had started because we were expecting our first child. And we also wanted to save money to buy a house. So in November of 2019, our daughter was born. And then in March, we all went under lockdown. And so I was actually living in a house with my wife, my daughter, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my sister-in-law's child, who was born 2.5 months after mine. Wow. It was fascinating. And having like at least 3 arguments before lunchtime meant that we were doing our jobs right. But I think one of the things that's been interesting about kind of living under the microscope, not to like go with Sartre, is that like there's a way in which being under constant observation challenged who I thought I was as a person. In a way, like having like 4 or 5 memories that I said, this defines me. Absolutely the case. But then realizing that most of my day is spent like doing menial tasks, kind of just regular existence, you know, kind of farting when I think nobody is listening, and then also tending to the needs of my daughter made me realize, oh, like there's a lot more to who I am, but there's also a lot less to who I am and a lot more that's banal. Thankfully, my wife and I are as strong as we've ever been. We've since moved into our own home with our daughter. We couldn't have done what we did without the help of the family around, and also being a white American living in a traditional Indian household for nearly a year was illuminating and made me realize how important it is to have family around, because we're so caught up in the sort of like nuclear option of just like having like mom, dad, and that's it. But having all of the support around, having all of these conversations made it very interesting, even if we came dangerously close to the maximum amount of people that we were allowed to have in one spot. So thanks for listening to The Ramble. I love everything that you all do. Can't wait every time you come out with an episode. And Survey, we're still waiting on that mukbang. Thank you so much for everything, folks.
Yeah, mukbang.
Oh, mukbang Indian food.
Oh my gosh, that was my first thought. I was like, you had to eat good for a year, probably. Thank you so much, Ross. That's really interesting. And I think that his comment there about the Sartre thing, I wasn't sure where he was going with that, but that makes such perfect sense. The idea of, being caught in the gaze of the other and being the object of another person's subjectivity does call into question so many things about our being. And so often we can just like be alone. So that is a really interesting like social experiment, but also
especially for Toobin.
Yes. Oh boy. But yeah. Wow. I'm trying to compliment Ross on this sort of like existential analysis he did on himself during this period. And all Alec can think about is a 60-year-old man jerking it.
Yeah, we know where your mind is. I love this voicemail. It's so interesting. And I'm very curious how Ross felt about being immersed in a different culture for so long. Because for me, having multi-generational households or having a lot of family around is quite normal. But for someone that's like from a different culture, especially an American culture where things are more individualistic and an Indian culture is more collectivistic, I'm curious how that felt. Like, was that a huge shock at first? Like for your mother-in-law to be like, oh, here, I'll watch your child, or like, oh, I made you your bed. Like, was that weird for you at first? Did you come to like it? Have you felt like your culture, like your personal culture, like the culture that you want to have with your wife and your child, like has that changed at all? So if you could write back, that would be great.
Yeah, call back, Ross, leave a 15-minute detailed message with the anthropological perspectives you've gained in this. No, that's awesome though. Do we have any other voicemails?
No other voicemails, but
Great.
Please do call us and leave them. Try to keep them to about a minute, but we do have some emails. The first one's a really interesting email from Brian. Last week or a few weeks ago, we were talking about the influencer party houses. Here's Brian's email. Really enjoyed the episode on the party house controversies happening in LA. I too, on the surface, initially cast blame on the young and wealthy people who disturb the neighborhood peace by throwing large non-COVID friendly events for new content. That's until I read an article by Bloomberg about the talent management firms who rent out these large houses in well-off parts of LA and essentially rent them out in kind to young influencers in exchange for a set amount of new content on a week-to-week basis. I again was forced to challenge my own biases and consider the possibilities that is not all the fault of irresponsible young people, but of profit-seeking firms looking to make money off whatever the latest trend is. I haven't read this Bloomberg article. That sounds super interesting and makes sense. That I would hope that there's
serfdom.
Digital serfdom. God, I would hope still that there's like a better way to make content, and I'm not going to excuse the parties, but I think that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, it makes me think there's some Run the Jewels song where Killer Mike says some verse, and it's something like, he's looking at the man behind the man behind the man behind the man. The point being, like, there's often like systems of power and corruption that get off the hook because we focus on the thing right in front of us. So that does sound kind of interesting that, like, we can say that these young influencers are just like obnoxious COVID truth or douchebags, but it might also be the case that there's larger forces pulling strings behind there and putting them in these situations. So I want to check that article out.
Yeah.
Thanks for the email.
That was great.
The next email is from Sean about relationships. a lot of people having some issues or maybe non-issues while in lockdown. This is Sean. I wanted to share one thought with regards to the conversation about online dating apps in the latest episode. In general, as a single person, I hate dating apps, and I agree that I very much miss the days of meeting people organically. That being said, I find there's a lot of stress and anxiety for me, at least with approaching people in public for the first time. I don't want to be the person bothering them if they're there just for a night out with friends or are in a relationship already, or for whatever other reason don't want to be bothered by someone like me. One silver lining that I've realized from using the apps is that at least you know the other people on there are also interested in entertaining the possibility of something romantic once it is determined if there's a spark or not. There isn't even that fear that you're bothering the person, or at least with respect to your interest in dating. Obviously, the potential creepiness of dudes can still be a bother, but that's an issue you've already discussed. Sorry, I misintroduced this one. This is about online dating apps. We just talk about, fucking and jerking and dating and all that stuff all the time. This is the eternal question. As someone, I really got burns with that one. So what do you guys think?
I think that there is something relieving about being on a dating app, because you know that person's there for a specific reason. They want to meet somebody else. And then the question is, do you want something long-term or short-term, or what are you looking for exactly? But at least you know that person is open to communication about this. So I agree. I think dating apps are great. And I get nervous if a guy approaches me in person, just because I just kind of get nervous around humans in general. So I think I might be sort of like, okay, thank you, bye, because I just get nervous. If it has nothing to do with the guy, it's completely a personal issue.
No, yeah, that email sounds really spot on, and he has a good perspective on that. It makes me miss the days. Well, I wasn't alive during these days, but like in the 70s, I know in a lot of cities like Chicago, they had a bunch of like singles bars, which were bars that you went to if you wanted to meet people. So you kind of knew, like, if you go to this bar, people are kind of like interested in meeting each other, so you're not being as creepy. But then it also makes me think, I just read Desus and Mero's book, God Level Knowledge Darts, that came out, which is very funny and insightful. And they had a section on dating, and there was a part where it's sort of like, but what if I see a woman on the train, we lock eyes, and I know that we have a special connection? And they were just like, bro, you don't be a creep. And, often there is a thing. And like, I'm sure I've been guilty of this, where I think men especially can create narratives by which, like, oh, I know this woman is like at the doctor's office right now, and she has like a compound fracture and she's crying, but like, maybe I need to walk across the emergency room and spit game because this is my moment. And I think that like there is something to be said for like not being a creepy dude, and dating apps creating those conditions. So yeah, I think we all agree on this. It's rough out there, and I don't envy anyone who has to date right now. And on another episode, I'll complain more about one of my friends who's dating right now, who's like going home with people after one night. And I just think it's the most horrifying thing ever. And there's a pandemic, and what are you doing with your life? But he doesn't listen to this podcast, so whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's someone for everyone. So if you're looking around, at least that's what I keep telling myself.
Yeah.
There is. They're just one in some case, though. So if you do not find them, you will die alone. I'm kidding. Sorry, it's horrible. Any other emails for this?
Yeah, we got one last one from Joshua. This one's about relationships. I'm sorry. I'm a dum-dum.
No, you're not. You're great.
Thank you. I'm writing regarding relationships through COVID. The end of 2019, I was considered proposing to my girlfriend of 5 years. I've been forced to work from home, and my girlfriend has lost all of her work in live theater. We both have suffered from depression in the past, and I was initially worried for us getting through this whole situation due to all the compacting stresses. Many friends of mine have wanted to break up, and one met a person and married him during the quarantine. That is very intense.
Whoa.
Yeah. Throughout this pandemic, I've actually been incredibly reassured in the strength of my relationship. I encouraged. I think they mean encouraged. I encouraged my girlfriend to start her own online shop, and she has pushed her boy to paint D&D miniatures, which I've always wanted to do, but never felt I had the time to take up. We have worked on our communicating, practice dancing together. She taught me how to make my own pajamas. I've taught her Spanish, and we've had huge gaming sessions together. That sounds magical.
This couple is awesome.
Yeah, I know a lot of couples are struggling. I wish them the best, but I thought y'all could use a rose that grew through the concrete during all the misery of 2020. And hey, if your relationship isn't as maybe beautiful as this one, don't feel bad. Everyone's different, but yeah.
I loved this email. When I read it, I was having the worst day and I read this email and it just made me so happy. I was like, this is so wonderful. I'm like, this is so nice to hear that a couple took this time and they were able to strengthen their relationship. So thank you so much for sharing.
That's amazing. It really made me happy. I hope y'all get married and stay together forever. And you deserve all the happiness in the world. And if you want, Wisecrack will sponsor your wedding.
Yeah, we'll sponsor your wedding. Michael will officiate it. I think philosophers are allowed to officiate weddings, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Great. Well, so thanks again, everyone, for calling and emailing. We say it every time. We really mean it. We love this stuff. Even the ones we don't have time to read or listen to, it makes us so happy to hear from you all. And sadly, some things get cut for time. But once again, culturebinge@wisecrack.co is where you can email us. 213-534-8807 is where you can call us. In the meantime, we'll be really quick because we're growing so long today. If people want to find you in the meantime, Serby, where do they do it?
Surya Patel 22 on Twitter.
Alec, where are you?
Twitter @WisecrackAlec.
Cool. I'm Michael O'Burns on all the social media stuff. Follow us, find us, don't be creeps, be friends. And we'll catch you in a couple weeks. This has been Culture Binge. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.